Thank you for the opportunity to let me speak today. I have nothing to disclose. The current surgical training and practice climate can best be described as a leaky pipeline for women. Women make up 50% of medical students, yet only make up 38% of general surgery residents, 26% of assistant professors in surgery, and 10% of full professors in surgery. At each promotion and advancement stage, women leak from this surgical talent pipeline. One component of visibility and career advancement is being selected for a speaking role at national conferences. Particularly for those of us in academic medicine, conference speaking opportunities are a part of our tenure and advancement, since appointment and promotion committees use speaking roles as evidence of national and regional recognition. And studies have shown that women are underrepresented among speakers at conferences, with particular work being done in emergency medicine, microbiology, and evolutionary biology. However, data studying surgical conferences is lacking. This is in addition to grassroots efforts with groups such as Bias Watch Neuro, who reports the gender breakdown of neuro-related conferences. There's also online petitions, which call for greater gender equity at our scholarly conferences, as well as blogs, such as the All Male Panels blog, who calls attention to conferences and symposia whose programs don't include women. So, with these formal academic and grassroots efforts as our foundation, we really wanted to examine the gender representation of women at surgical conferences. And specifically, our aims were to, 1, assess the representation of women in major speaking roles at national conferences, and 2, to assess whether the representation has changed over time. So to do this, we gathered data on gender of members from 6 national surgical societies for the years 2011 and 2016. We also analyzed the corresponding conference proceedings from those same years. And in those conference proceedings, we looked at the gender of speakers, as well as speaker categories: plenary, panelists, moderators, and lunch speakers, with those last sessions being combined into a general category of session speakers. We also looked at the incidence of all-male panels at conferences, which we defined as 2 or more speakers in a session, all of whom were male. For our analysis, we excluded scientific presentations because we wanted to focus on invited lectures, and we used chi-square tests to compare the proportions. So the following 6 societies contributed data for our project, and each will be randomly assigned a letter, and all data is reported as proportions, as to not distinguish which society is which based on the size of their membership or the size of their meeting. So in this graph, the dark gray bars on top represent the percent of plenary speaking roles filled by men at a given conference, and the bottom maroon bars represent the proportion of speaking roles filled by women. Those black horizontal lines are the proportion of women in the membership. So to go through this a bit, for Society A in 2011, women were 36% of plenary speakers and were 22% of the membership base in that year. For Society A in 2016, women were 10% of plenary speakers for that conference, yet were 24% of the membership base. Amongst these 6 societies, women in plenary speaking roles ranged from 0% to 36% of speakers in 2011 and 0 to 50% of plenary speakers in 2016. And there was no statistically significant over or underrepresentation of women in plenary speaking roles. But notably, you can see that societies B, C, and D had no women in plenary speaking roles in either year. Here's the same type of graph for session speakers, which encompasses the people in moderator, panelist, and lunch speaking roles. Women in session speaking roles ranged from 0 to 30% of speakers overall in 2011 and 0 to 37% of speakers in 2016. So you can see there's statistically significant underrepresentation of women for Society F in 2011, but this underrepresentation is corrected by 2016. You can also see statistically significant overrepresentation of women as session speakers for Societies D and E in 2016. This graph depicts the percent of all-male panels at conferences in 2011 and 2016 amongst these 6 societies. The societies are listed across the bottom. Those dark green bars are the panels in 2011, and the light green are 2016. So to remind you, an all-male panel is when there's 2 or more speakers in a session and all of the speakers are male. So all-male panels for 2011 ranged from 43% to 100% of panels at conferences, and 28% to 100% of panels in 2016. And societies A and F significantly reduced the proportion of all-male panels at their conferences in 2016 when compared to their 2011 rates, but there was no significant difference over time amongst the remaining societies. So we found that there's low overall numbers of women in plenary speaking roles, and we feel that correcting this could serve as an opportunity for societies to increase the visibility of women in prominent speaking roles amongst societies. We also show that women are increasing as a proportion of session speakers, but this growth isn't uniform across societies. We also show a decreasing trend of all-male panels amongst some societies. And outside research has shown that giving organizing committees specific instructions to reduce all-male panels at conferences can actually improve speaker diversity. So this could be one actionable item that societies use to improve the speaker diversity at their conferences. We also see low levels of women in society membership. And while this could reflect low rates of women in particular subspecialties, low rates of women members may underline the importance of exposure and career advancement opportunities like speaking roles. There's an important opportunity for surgical organizations to critically evaluate the diversity and inclusion of their organization and to generate strategic plans to address these issues. A great example of this is actually the SAGES Climate Survey, which was just published a few days ago. In this survey, SAGES identified an issue with diversity in the organization. And now SAGES leadership has proactively responded by making plans to ensure diverse representation in SAGES committees and at SAGES meetings in terms of session chairs and speakers. So there's progress there. This sort of critical reflection undertaken by SAGES should serve as a model of self-evaluation for all surgical societies. So in conclusion, there was some progress between 2011 and 2016, particularly with women in session speaking roles and in reducing all-male panels at some societies, but more work needs to be done, specifically to increase the rates of women in plenary speaking roles in particular. And we recommend that all surgical conferences actively monitor the gender balance of their speakers in order to achieve better gender representation at their conferences. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Dr. Feldman?
Thanks, Leanne Feldman from Montreal. Really well presented, and I really enjoyed the study and really nicely done. I just had one question, which is, were you able to look in your data about the impact of who the session chair is on the composition of the panel? Because in a lot of conferences, the society might identify the chair and the co-chair of the session, who are then charged with asking the specific speakers. Mm-hmm. And perhaps one would hypothesize that if the chair and the co-chair have a certain level of diversity, then perhaps, but it's not necessarily true, that they might populate their panel one way or another. Are you able to look at that at all?
So we haven't been able to perform that analysis yet, but currently we are gathering data on the makeup of the conference organizing committees to see if we find a correlation there. Other groups, Robin Klein, actually from our institution at Washington University, has shown that there is a positive correlation between the proportion of women on a conference organizing committee and the rates of women speakership within her field in immunology. And so, yeah, we are performing that analysis now, and that's going to be our next direction.
I very much commend you for this work. It's very interesting. Why blind us to who the societies are? Because I would think if my society recognized that, I mean, you did all the work and you were able to show that some societies are not making progress as we should be. Don't you think if they knew that they might make a more conscious effort, particularly if they knew that they were going to be put out there as a society that might not be as progressive as others, that they would make some changes?
So yeah, our goal wasn't to shame societies, as societies voluntarily provided us with this data, and we did feedback this data to the societies that participated privately. They understand their identity, and they can also look at the graphs and see where they are in relation to their peers. But just for broad distribution, we wanted to comment more on the field as a whole, as opposed to singling out specific societies.
Yeah. Thank you. I also I think that we should get away from saying that shaming a society as opposed to just making it transparent. So, but thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.